All right, Groovesters, Ridgely here, the Groove Growth Guy, and I'm super excited about our Groove Growth program with a very, very dear friend who has been through a lot, and therefore knows a lot and can share a lot about how the rest of us don't maybe have to go through a lot like she did. She is a super creative person, so many different programs, so much experience online. And most importantly, for all of us in this period of going through mental health and fitness that we're working on, busting limited beliefs. That limiting beliefs, that's what we're going to do. Limiting, all kinds of beliefs that are limit-like in some way or another. We've known each other for a long time and belong to multiple masterminds together, et cetera. My very good friend, Jackie Simmons. Jackie, thank you so much for joining the Groove community. Super excited to have you here. And well, first of all, I'll just say hello on behalf of all of us. Hi.
Hi, Ridgely. It's super happy to be here. All right, everybody, hang on. It's going to move really fast. How do we know? Ridgely and I are both problem solvers.
That's right.
So we're going to both be gathering information from each other. And then at some point, one of us is going to bust out with something that's going to shock you, probably shock each of us. And then we'll unpack it for you because that's exactly how it rolls.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about this concept of limiting beliefs. What is a limiting belief to kick this off?
A limiting belief is nothing more than a decision you made, probably at a time you don't remember, that served you then and doesn't serve you now. It limits you in some way. Limiting beliefs are what create our comfort zone. You remember comfort zones? I know you don't have very many because you stretch all the time. But I lived a lot of my life inside my comfort zone. And my comfort zone could be summed up as my life was just good enough that I wasn't hungry and just bad enough that I wasn't happy. The diagnosis that I was given when I sought help was clinical depression. What I really had was a life totally driven by beliefs that limited who I thought I could be in the world, how the world worked, even who I really thought I was. Limiting beliefs are the cause of imposter syndrome. That feeling that you're not ready yet, maybe you're not really good enough, and certainly you're not worth what people are telling you. You got good coaches, they're telling you to rate that your work is worth this, and you go, that's a sign that you have a limiting belief. We call it an elephant in the room.
I love that when you said it was good enough that I wasn't hungry, but bad enough that I wasn't happy. And how many people literally go through that space of, I'm just going to stay in my little lane, whatever that thing is, because I'm not hungry, even though I'm not happy. Change is difficult. And therefore, I'm just going to hang out here, despite the fact that it's not great. So, okay, let's back up. Let's back up over here. Let's back up. Tell us your story about this, because I think it's really putting it into a real context that people can say, oh, wow, I can relate to that. Would be awesome for all the community. Tell us a little bit about your story and confronting limiting beliefs.
The power that what we believe holds over us is invisible. And yet it's like living in an invisible jail. My belief that as a single mother who had been raised by a single mother who had a high school degree and 3 kids, that I would never be able to survive on my own, led me from being my own business owner to being married to someone who was financially stable, but not such a nice guy. And the only reason I stayed in that marriage was because I believed that that was the only way I could financially take care of my children. It wasn't true. How do we know it wasn't true? Kid graduated high school. We got divorced. A year later, after him telling me that I could not afford to keep that townhouse without him, he was right. But not quite the way he meant it. A year later, I bought a single family house less than 1 mile away. It was the belief system. And that belief system gets reinforced by our conversations. And by the way, it gets reinforced by the conversations of the people who love us the most. Why? When you go to take a step outside of your comfort zone, you go to do something a little bit new, a little bit different, something nobody else in the family has done. And your family goes into what we call, with all affection, crab mode. You know the story about the crabs in a bucket, Ridgely? You know, you put one crab in, you got to get that lid on really fast because it'll scurry away. You put 2 crabs in, you don't have to put the lid on anymore, because no matter which crab starts to climb up, the other one's going to pull it back down to keep it safe. The other name for a comfort zone is the circle of firelight. We are genetically hardwired to pull each other back into the light to prevent us from going out and exploring because it was dangerous out there. And we embed these beliefs into our children to keep them safe. We don't want them going off and exploring the world, walking into traffic, things like that. So we embed these beliefs to keep them safe, but then we don't tell them how to bust them so that they can expand and grow and explore when it's safe for them to do so. And that's the problem. And so busting that belief for me required me studying with a lot of really smart people. And I did most of my studying by reading books. I was a self-help book junkie. And then as my finances improved and the world expanded, I became a personal and professional development program junkie. And you know you're a junkie when you're putting more than 5 figures a year into your personal and professional development. And I'm a multiple 5-figure, sometimes 6-figure a year kind of consumer. What that did for me was gave me the ability to have different perspectives. And when you can look at a problem from different perspectives, it stops being a 2-dimensional straight line, yes, no, black, white, and it starts having all of these possibilities and potentials. And my vocabulary started including things like, I am creative, capable, and resourceful enough to manage my own life. That language, I believe, came from, it was told to me, but they said it came from nonviolent communication from that book. And the only thing I know about that book is that it busted a limiting belief for a lot of people. He got a massive amount of kickback on that title. Did you know that they almost didn't publish it? Because they thought the title was too negative. Because in the positivity movement, you don't use words like nonviolent. You would say positive communication. And the man who wrote it said, if I title it that, nobody will buy it. And he was right. We have a natural negative bias in our brains. And if we ignore that, then we are ignoring one of the most important pieces of human communication, which is to be able to speak the way people listen. And it's something that you're an expert on in all of the wide varieties of ways that you talk about it. My own experience was that I could talk about all of the positives in the world and nobody bought what I was selling. When I started talking about busting limiting beliefs, and before that, I created slogans like, when you hit rock bottom, you've got no place to go but up. And addressing the elephant in the room. And the problem with the limiting belief is, one, it's invisible to everybody who's experiencing it, and often really visible to the rest of us. And the other thing is that it's simply a decision. And once you understand that, then there's a simple way to shift. And it, thank God for neuroscience. You know, neuroscience, the way we talk about brain plasticity, it's only been around for about 6 years.
I think maybe with those terms. I think that the wisdom of the ages dates back to Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and beyond. And I think there's probably maybe not neuroplasticity with that terminology, but that wisdom is since the beginning of mankind.
You know the difference between wisdom and science?
What's that?
Science tells you what can't happen. Like the human body is structurally incapable of running a mile in less than 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That was science.
Right.
Until along came a man who did it.
Right.
Until 2016, the prevailing science wisdom, they called it the prevailing wisdom, but it was the prevailing science, was that our brains became fixed at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
Harvard Medical School in 2016 did a little study. And it was published in Time magazine in January of 2017, if anybody's really curious about it. The study was this: they got a random group of people, brought them in, got their permission, scanned their brains, and then gave them a little piece of music to learn, to play on the piano. So they gave them a keyboard. And when people could play that little piece of music from memory, they scanned their brains again. And they were shocked because the brain built out new neural matter. That wasn't supposed to be happening. New neural matter was built out. And they went, wow, okay. So shock. Now it's been validated by many other studies since then. And Harvard, being Harvard Medical School, they decided to do the experiment again.
Mm-hmm.
Random group of people, same brain scan, same piece of music, because they used good scientific method. Except this time they didn't give them a piano, and they asked them to imagine playing it. And when they could imagine playing it all the way through without any skips, they scanned their brains again. Funny thing, the brains built out the exact same new matter as the people who had been in the first study with the piano. Now, like you said, the wisdom of the ages, any Olympic coach could have told them what they were going to find, because they have Olympiads visualize successfully performing their event over and over and over and over, and it builds out muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
So Harvard now had scientific proof of what people in the athletic field have known for ages, upon ages.
And take me back to when you first started reading personal growth stuff, et cetera, because I had the same experience. I got out from under the influence of my super controlling family, moved 3,000 miles away where I knew not a single human being, not one, and then started personal growth, personal development. And I, like you, started out initially with books, and then it was tapes, and then it was videos, and then it was appearances, and then it was workshops, and then it's whatever. And I've been a 5-figure-a-year guy for decades at this point. 6 in certain cases, but not every year. But certainly, masterminds I belong to cost way into that. What was the first kind of thing that struck you? What was like when you first picked up? Do you remember what was the first one or two, or in the early days of picking up a book or two, which ones grabbed you and why? And I want to preface this by saying everything you're saying, neuroplasticity. So let me give that in the words of a guy who really wasn't around when neuroplasticity was being talked about, named Jim Rohn, right? So Jim, what did Jim Rohn used to say? He used to say, and he'd say it like this: everything starts with your personal philosophy, right? With his Jim Rohn voice. And he'd say, because your personal philosophy determines your thoughts determine your actions, and your actions always determine the results. Therefore, what are you doing to shift, grow, adapt, increase, better your personal philosophy? Was where Jim was coming from, which is how are you shifting the neural pathways of your brain? He didn't call it neuroplasticity, but he was basically saying the same thing.
Oh, they've been saying the same thing forever, which is what was so funny. We now have testing for everything. And before we had testing, we had observation, what works and what doesn't. But before you can put into place observation about what works and what doesn't, you have to believe that you have the ability to change, to adapt. if I had hit Jim Rohn first, I might have put those books down and walked away, because I would have guaranteed you I did not have a personal philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it just wasn't my language.
Right.
I got really, really lucky. In high school, I started in an organization called Junior Achievement. It's sort of like 4-H for city kids, where we learned about business. And the Dale Carnegie organization decided to give us their training. So I started with Dale Carnegie and his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm. Such a great one. I have it right there.
Oh my God. Yeah. I got a new one that fits in my pocketbook just recently.
Nice.
The idea that some wisdom is timeless and some things just speak to us in different ways. What's really funny is that the latest book I was given, and I would not have bought this book on a bet, but because the title is $100 million Offers, which the fact that I would not have bought that book tells me I still have an elephant in the room about what's possible for my company. But it's by Alex Hormozi. And he takes and has this great formula for why people don't buy, and removing the resistance about the amount of time it's going to take or the amount of effort they're going to have to put in. And I just read that and I started laughing. Dale Carnegie said exactly that when he said, make the problem seem easy to solve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The biggest challenge that I had coming into the personal and professional development realm, and especially into the coaching realm, which, by the way, I'm not a certified coach, guys. This is my disclaimer. I predate the whole coaching industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it didn't exist back then. When I got started, I was a consultant. I'm still a consultant. I'm a stress management consultant. Now I do it in a different way than I used to, thank goodness. But the power of being able to just go make the problem seem easy to solve, that spoke to me, and it still does.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in the coaching industry, I went through years where I was being guided to make it seem like somebody couldn't solve the problem without me.
Right. Because that was the rhetoric that they would tell you, make yourself indispensable or seemingly indispensable, as opposed to give the person every possible help and support and system that you can to make them succeed.
It was a very different philosophy, and it took me into a very dark place.
Mm-hmm.
It was coming out of that space where I had bought, because limiting beliefs, some of them are taught to us. Most of them we catch. They're caught, not taught, from the people around us. And I had caught so many limiting beliefs growing up that I was kind of susceptible. If somebody around me had a limiting belief, I would probably buy into it, especially if it had to do with what my potential was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't.
I think a lot of people suffer from that.
It makes me a lot more mindful about who I hang around now. Let me tell you, community matters here.
Yeah, no doubt.
When I graduated from one of the certification programs I was in, and I'm a multi-certified expert. That's a fancy way of saying that I'm basically certifiable.
Mm-hmm.
And, my graduation, the headmaster of this school, the founder of this institute, asked me to come on as faculty, to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I was flattered, but I wanted to go change the world. I didn't want to, I'm an entrepreneur at spirit. I did not want to be inside somebody's, as a teacher. The third time he asked me, he told me why. Now, I had just spent 5 years in this school, multiple 5 figures. And he told me that only the teachers were making a living. The practitioners were not. The school had been in business almost 20 years. And yet the practitioners weren't making a living. I felt totally betrayed. And because of that emotion, now I know what happened. What happened was a transference of his limiting belief about what was possible. And I bought into it. What did my experience become as a practitioner? one without much money attached to it, because the unconscious belief that I had caught from him and continued to buy and sell myself was that I couldn't make money doing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I had understood that when our behaviors are not producing abundance for us in any area of our life, whether it's an abundance of love or an abundance of money, doesn't matter. If we're not feeling fulfilled and on purpose, there's an elephant in the room. And you could probably trace it back to a belief that you bought into or that you caught from somebody that you have an emotional attachment to what they say.
Mm-hmm.
The more emotion, the faster that belief gets reinforced because of the brain and the way it works with the reticular activating system, only allowing in a little tiny bit of the evidence and just what aligns most closely with what we believe.
And I think it's really interesting.
System.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really interesting to point out to the Groove community that that's why this community is so important. That's why it's so important to participate in Groove growth and in these programs, so that you surround yourself by people who are doing things, who are opening their minds, who are reading, listening, watching, hanging out with people that have different philosophies that are abundant, etc. It's kind of hard. I mean, some people say, I always like being the dumbest person in the room. Now, I have an issue with that concept. It's like, no, I would like to be hanging out with like-minded, abundant people. And I don't have to be the most successful person in the room, the poorest person in the room, the smartest, or the dumbest at all. I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up and see what I can learn, what I can glean, what I can serve, and how I can help, so that it becomes an ecosystem of success. Because while they say that misery loves company, I happen to know that success likes company too.
Amen to that. It's funny who perpetuates these things. It was Tony Robbins who said that when he goes into a mastermind, if he's making the most money in the mastermind, he's in the wrong mastermind. And I'm like, what a great loss to the community if he is always seeking out a place where he's not able to be the person that people can emulate. But I think he missed the point. And I love Tony, don't get me wrong. He was one of my early ones, his Notes to a Friend book. And I'm one of those cassette people, back in the day of Automobile University. So it's a belief system that doesn't sit well with me. And I didn't understand why until just recently. And that's what's so funny, is that we're having this interview now, because if we had been talking 6 months ago, we'd have been having a very different conversation.
Well, and isn't that interesting, that message to everyone watching or listening? There's never a time that's too late to begin the process of expansion and expanding your mind and overcoming those limiting beliefs. So what did it look like for you early on when you started to recognize, wow, I have these and I got to get rid of them? How'd that kind of evolve?
Well, how did that kind of evolve? Gee, did I evolve? I think there are two types of ways that people change. One is the evolutionary method. You're kind of growing a little bit, you're growing a little bit, you're growing a little bit, and you can see sort of incremental progress. We all know people like that. I'm not that. My world looks like nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing's happening, then pop, and I'm over here. And people go, wait a minute, weren't you? Yeah. And so mine happens in more of a revolutionary manner. Revolutionary for me. August the 3rd, 2019. My middle daughter, Stephanie's 37 years old, gave a 7-minute message that matters. Now, that's what I was doing back then, is I was teaching people how to sell in 7 minutes or less, how to give a 7-minute presentation that actually led to people purchasing whatever it was that you were talking about. Well, Stephanie wasn't an entrepreneur, but she had a message. She sat through the class. Oh my God, Ridgely, you'll love this. Everything worked that day. The PowerPoints worked, the slide projector, the microphones, but everything worked. And Stephanie was getting into that nervous, excited state you get into right before you give a talk. Super proud of my daughter. She looked amazing. You know, dark blouse, flowery skirt, her hair was pulled back in combs. She was first up on the speakers roster, and I welcomed her to the front of the room. Everyone help me welcome Stephanie Ashton. Oh my God, I was so excited. I go to the back of the room. Stephanie starts talking. And the first words out of her mouth were, 3,000 teenagers will attempt to take their own lives today, just in the US. In the back of the room, I went, huh? I had no idea the number was that large, and I had no idea suicide was her topic. Her next sentence was when I was 14, after a bad day of shopping. And she shared that the pain of not fitting into any clothes was for her that day proof that she did not fit in anywhere. And the pain was more than she could bear. And yeah, that she was talking about the day that she first attempted to take her own life. And while I had lived through it with her, we hadn't really talked about it in like 23 years, because I had sold myself on the belief that as long as she was getting professional help, we didn't need to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it. And I was scared of putting the idea back in her head if we talked about it.
Mhm.
So I left it to the realm of professionals. And at the end of Stephanie's 7-minute talk, she shared that she still struggled with suicidal thoughts.
Mhm.
It was only 30 years of stress management training that kept me from crawling into a corner of that room and just bawling my eyes out. After that talk, I mean, Stephanie got a standing ovation. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. People were rushing up and hugging her, and yeah. I mean, thanking her for being so brave. And in the back of the room, I was frozen. I was totally torn between pride for her bravery and guilt and shame for my cowardice. And I wondered if anybody realized that at 3,000 a day, the numbers are staggering. And this was before COVID. What happened after that day is Stephanie and I decided to work together. Who knew that was possible? And along with her sisters, we co-founded the Teen Suicide Prevention Society. And we went on a journey to figure out how the teen brain really worked. Why is there so much of a higher risk with teenagers? And then we realized that it's how everybody's brain works. And so for 2 years, I spent deep diving into that world, not looking for another suicide intervention program. Those are great, and there are a lot of them out there, and they are amazing. Those people who work in them are awesome. We decided we needed to go way upstream and look at pure prevention and what that would look like. So we're not trying to stop people from taking their lives. We're trying to stop suicidal thinking from getting stuck in someone's head.
Mhm.
The ultimate limiting belief is when you think you don't have any other options. What we learned is people don't take their own lives because they're trying to die. They take their own lives when they no longer can figure out how to live. So suicide seems like not just the best option, but the only option. So we started looking at what is it that allows the brain to have more options? What is it that allows the brain to expand? And it was in the creation of that program that led to what looks like this revolution in my business, where I added all that we learned over there with what I had been doing with sales. And now, what do I help people do? I help them learn to sell themselves on themselves before they try to sell anybody else on anything. And that means busting the limiting beliefs. We call it taming the elephant in the room.
Taming the elephant in the room. And for sure, there's just no question that before people buy your services or your products, they've got to buy you. That trust thing has got to be established. So if you don't have that feeling about yourself, then it's really kind of a really tough space to be in. And we really need to challenge this for so many reasons. Not only for our own personal enjoyment and satisfaction, but it bleeds into success and relationships and business and friends and family and all of the areas that whose story, his story, her story, history, am I buying into, right? What is it? Is it mine? Am I creating it myself, or am I buying into somebody else's story? Jim Rohn used to say about success in business, he used to say, if you don't write your own story and create your own story, you're going to fall into somebody else's. And guess what they have planned for you? Not much, right?
You know, I love Jim Rohn and the power of this idea that we are living the story. We're living the story that we believe about who we are, how the world works, and who we can be in the world. And those are all decisions that are made between the ages of 0 and 18. Oh, and by the way, the reason that's a problem, your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until you are 24, if you're lucky. So we've made all the decisions that dictate our lives at a time we don't even have a whole brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the fun part is that now that you have a whole brain, you can actually learn to train it. You can learn to expand it. You can learn to easily bust through limiting beliefs, which is my favorite thing to do, as you know. Yeah. So instead of teaching people how to sell in 7 minutes or less, now I teach them how to bust their limiting beliefs permanently in 60 minutes or less.
Yeah. And by the way, everybody, we have an amazing gift from Jackie at the end of this presentation. So we're going to keep talking for a little bit longer, but stick around for sure, because you don't want to miss what Jackie is offering our community, which is amazing. And so tell me, as you look back and you see these, and I wanted to touch on one point that you made before we go any further. It doesn't matter whether your growth mechanism, whoever's watching or listening to this, is a slow and steady incremental growth, or it's that other more revolutionary way that Jackie was talking about. And by the way, I want to just touch base on that, because an oak grows to 60, 80 feet in the sky very slowly and steadily, and they keep growing. Bamboo hangs out under the ground for years and then explodes and grows to that 60, 80 feet in a matter of months. But it's not as though there wasn't effort and things going into that bamboo before it shot out, which is the more revolutionary way. So I just want to invite everybody who's watching or listening, doesn't matter which way your mechanism of learning is. Jackie's not suggesting that the only way is the revolutionary way. That's just her way.
Yeah.
But for all of us.
Yeah, we're all on that spectrum, somewhere between, one or the other. When it comes to decision making, we describe it in my household a little differently. The think it through, need a little more time, need a little more information. At the extreme is analysis paralysis.
Right.
And a little faster, a little quicker to decide, a little more intuitive. At the extreme is ready, fire, aim.
Right, exactly. Well, and neither of those work particularly well, right?
No, and they're usually married to each other. The person who's more this way is usually, and ideally, on a good day, you pull towards the middle. You want to partner with somebody whose decision-making style is different than yours. Because on a good day, you'll pull each other towards the middle. And in my household, on a bad day, it's sort of like being at a boxing match. You go to your corners.
So talk to the person who is feeling what you're saying. They're feeling, I know I have some limiting beliefs. I'm not even sure what they are. How do I deal with that?
First, it's not your fault. Period. It's not your fault. You inherited them. You caught them. You didn't think these up on your own. So be a little gentler with yourself. The second is ask a better question. Here's my favorite pair of questions. And I like questions in pairs. So here's the first part. If you want to stay stuck, ask the question, how do I change this? And the reason that will keep you stuck is because if you knew the answer to that question, you wouldn't be stuck in the first place. So you're asking your brain to come up with something that your brain already doesn't have a file folder for you. It's already like, nope, nothing here. I don't know how, because if I knew how, I'd do it already. So the pair for that, play Scrabble. Take that word how, rearrange the letters. Who? Who's done this before? Whose biography can I read? Whose book can I follow? Whose podcast can I listen to? Who has already done this? Mm-hmm. Your brain will accept the evidence of somebody else who's already done it as proof that it's possible for you. Mm-hmm. So that's the first one. If you feel stuck, stop asking how and start asking who. Who's done this? Who can I read? Who can I follow? Mm-hmm. And you're in a great community for that. I mean, let's just face it. This is a great community. This is a community full of who's.
That's exactly right. And there's so many ways to tap into it through Facebook groups, through community questions on blogs. I mean, there's just we make it so easily available, especially through Groove Growth as well, for sure. Okay. And now I'm starting to ask the question, but how do I find out what my limiting beliefs are?
Well, there are two ways. The first one is stick around for the free gift. The second one is the one we'll go into right now. The second one is to ask a question, because what you want, your limiting belief shows up as now they call it mindset. Back in my day, we called it attitude. So I have an attitude question. The attitude question is, what attitude would I have if I knew I worked with the best people in the world? I knew I had the best clients, the best mentors, the best boss, the best employees, the best co-workers in the world. What attitude would I have? Now, what's immediately going to pop up is your limiting belief, because if you're like the person in the audience the other day who said, my coworkers are pretty good, but best in the world, you did not hear them in that meeting. No. So it's going to show you where your limiting beliefs are. Now, I can prove that you've got the best in the world. You have right now, every single person listening to this, you have the absolute best clients, best mentors, best bosses, best employees, best coworkers in the world that you're ready for. Mm-hmm. How do I know? They're what you've got. Here's how you bust this limiting belief, that you think things should be some way other than they are. I call it arguing with reality. Instead of arguing with reality, take control and change your reality. Start treating everyone around you as if they are the best in the world based on this new piece of information. It's a possibility that was available to your brain at no other time other than right now. Accept that they are the best people in the world that you're ready for. Start treating them as if they are the best. And one of two things will happen. Either they will change or they will change. The people around you will change how they behave, which is really likely because how we're treated really does pull out the best in us if we are treated as if we are the best. Mm-hmm. Just the way the brain works. Mm-hmm. Or it will be so uncomfortable, so far outside of their comfort zone to be seen as the best in the world because it doesn't match their worldview of who they can be in the world, that mm-hmm. they will move on to some place that fits their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. You got to be willing to let them go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no kidding, right? Time for a period of separation.
I think these, by the way, part of my background is human resources. And what I learned as a consultant in human resources is that the scourge of our current philosophies in business is that we have employees who have disengaged. We call them disengaged workers. They have checked out but they're still showing up and collecting a paycheck. I call it opting out of the ballpark. But they're not playing the game. They're not enthusiastic about it anymore. And yet they're still getting a paycheck. And when you know that you have someone who has mentally left, allow them to take their whole body with them.
Yeah. Right. Sounds so obvious, but that's exactly right. If they mentally checked out, they could check out the rest of themselves too.
Yeah, the reality is that you want to encourage them to find their bliss somewhere else if they can no longer enjoy the game that you're playing in your business, what I call your ballpark. Maybe it's time for them to go from baseball to basketball. Sports analogies work for me. The power of allowing them to go means that everybody on their team is going to be grateful because we all know who they are. They're the best in the world that you were ready for up until you listened to this talk. And now you're going to be ready for something better. You're going to treat them as if they are the best in the world, and they will leave if they're not willing to step up into that. And you don't have to get all antsy or mean. All you have to do is treat them like they're the best in the world.
And let them move on.
And let them move on if it's time for them to move on. If they cannot step up, please let them step out. To keep them around is cruel to them and you.
If they can't step up, just let them step out. I love that. That's awesome. Great stuff.
All right, now here's the other side of the coin. Remember, I said I like questions that come in pairs. That was the attitude question. Here's the next one. How do you spot a limiting belief? Ask yourself this question. What actions would I take if I knew I was the right person for the job? And when you start listing the actions that you already have this list in your subconscious mind, by the way, what actions would I take if I knew I was the right person for the job? And you write down those actions. And then you will be able to spot your limiting beliefs. It'll be all of the thoughts that come up that tell you why you can't do those things, why it's not the right time, why you're not ready, the why answers. If it tells you why you can't, that's a limiting belief.
Yeah. Wow. That's really good.
Well, thank you.
That's really good. You're welcome. Thank you.
I like simple.
You're the one sharing all this great stuff.
Well, I like simple. Those two questions alone, the attitude question, what attitude would I have if I knew I worked with the best in the world? And what actions would I take if I knew I was the right person for the job? Allow you to hear what's happening inside your head and to actually start to get to know what decisions you made about all the people around you and the products you're offering and the services you're offering. When you start going at them as if they are the best in the world, you will start to see where there are cracks in your foundation of your belief systems. And sometimes it's the cracks in your foundation of the product that you're offering, because there's something about the product that needs to be fixed. This is a way of shining a really bright light on it. And it starts with acceptance. It's the best in the world you were ready for up until you decided to go on this particular little growth walk with Ridgely and me. And now you've got this other way of looking at things. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I need to fix this. If it's not your business and it's not your product, you might get to a point where you have to accept their rules of the game without conflict and move on. If it no longer matches your worldview of who you are and what you're ready to offer to the world. These two questions will get you there really quickly and might make you just a little uncomfortable. You know, that comfort zone we were talking about earlier? Yeah. These two questions kind of stretch it.
We like stretching the comfort zone. That's what we do in Groove. Now, I know you have something for our community to help them with this process. Tell us a little bit about that.
We're going to get together. We're going to spend 1 hour together. And in 1 hour, we're going to take this discussion and actually pinpoint it right at the limiting belief that you have that is creating the tendency to procrastinate, hide, or have symptoms of imposter syndrome. We just go right at it. And in less than 60 minutes, we will bust it. And you will have a way to build upon that. Because originally, and I love this example that you use about, you have a thread of a belief, and then, you start wrapping events around it, and eventually you get a cable. We have the process that helps people build out the opposite of the limiting belief, the expanding belief, the empowering belief. And when you do it, and it takes less than 5 minutes a day. So in less than 5 minutes a day, you're just going to do what we call walk the elephant. And it has 4 steps. It's simple. And it will absolutely pull the energy from the neural network that was restrictive and constricting emotions and redirect it into this new expanding belief system. And
wow.
So there we go. 1 hour.
I love that. So team, everybody, what you want to do is click on the button below, right? Click on the button below so that you can get this fabulous hour of magnificence from Jackie to help you bust through your limiting beliefs. And by the way, I know, being part of the Groove community, I know of so many of these beliefs. I don't know if I'm technical enough. I don't know if I can learn this stuff. I don't know if my list has the right people. I don't know if, they're on and on and on. Here in Groove, you have everything that you need to succeed, because there are people who are succeeding right now with what they have, which is the same thing that you have. So we need to bust through these limiting beliefs, take advantage of Jackie's generosity, click on the button below and go get that gift from Jackie to help you bust through your limiting beliefs. What thoughts are you leaving with us as we wrap up our time together? And I'll get to thanking you momentarily, but what other thoughts do you want to leave with our Groove community?
You just listed off the shortcut to know whether or not you have a limiting belief. Are you ready?
Sure.
3 words. If you hear yourself say or think, I don't know. If those words come out of your mouth, there's an elephant in the room. Let's go bust it.
Awesome. Well, Jackie, thank you so much. Really incredibly great conversation we're having. Very enlightening, and what a tremendous gift to our community. We all want to continue our journey of expansion in all levels, and certainly busting limiting beliefs is a major component to that. So Groovesters, you know who you are. Click on the button below, take advantage of Jackie's tremendous gift, and let's keep going in that conversion from Groovesters to Groove Stars. Thank you so much, Jackie, for your time. We deeply, deeply appreciate it. Appreciate you, your journey, your knowledge, and your friendship. On behalf of all of the Groove community, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you, thank you, thank you.